Kids in the U.S. could soon be learning about the dangers of communism right in their schools. That's right, the dangers of communism. The House of Representatives passed a bill on this. This move actually brings up an even bigger topic than just communism, though, but also with how the Chinese Communist Party has been infiltrating our education system, something they're going to be teaching our students about, hopefully. I'll be going into this today. Also, in other news, the world economies appear to have reached the brink. Many countries are facing serious economic problems, and it now appears that many of them don't have an easy way out to avoid something really serious. You have a lot of different governments right now kind of on the brink and could have to reform massively. On this topic as well, President-elect Donald Trump has given a preview on upcoming spending cuts under DOGE. That's the Department of Government Efficiency, something that even other countries that really don't want to might need to adopt as well. And I'll be going into these topics and more today, so let's get started. First of all, folks, kids in the United States, right in your own local public schools, they could start learning about the dangers of communism. A bill was actually passed on this earlier this month in the House, and it would see the creation of a civic curriculum and other resources in U.S. high schools to educate kids about what communism really is, and most importantly about the harm it has caused the world. The bill is called the Crucial Communism Teaching Act, and it was passed in an overwhelming vote of 327 to 62. It received support from both Democrats and from Republicans. Big margin this passed by. Now let me show you the summary of the actual bill. It directs the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation, and they're going to be developing a civic education curriculum and oral history resources for high school students to promote understandings of certain political ideologies, communism and totalitarianism, most importantly, that conflict with principles of U.S. democracy. And also, folks, I think it's significant this has bipartisan support. Look, only 62 of the 327 members who voted for it. Again, 62 voted against it, 327 voted for it. That's a huge margin supporting, again, exposing communism to our kids. I found it encouraging, actually, the majority of our representatives actually do oppose communism to the extent they believe the education system should teach our kids about it. I found that very encouraging to see, actually. Now, the bill, and on that point, too, that means it has a good chance of getting passed also in the Senate if it maintains that margin, because, I mean, that's a pretty big margin to pass by. Now, the bill also points to the need to teach students about the past and present communist and totalitarian regimes, and they specifically point out the Chinese Communist Party, and they note the curriculum should focus on ongoing human rights abuses by these communist regimes in the world today, like China, the Chinese regime, including exposing the treatment of Uyghurs, Muslim Uyghurs in Xinjiang. Notably, the CCP uses them as slaves in a lot of these slave camps. A lot of the cotton industry, notably, comes from Chinese Uyghurs. And these individuals, of course, also subjected to an extent to live organ harvesting. And the CCP does do some other terrible things to them. The Chinese Communist Party persecutes Christians to a very large extent, mostly by demolishing their churches, demanding money from them, seizing their funds, bankrupting them. They also regulate the Christian religion so that you can't display the 10 Commandments. Notably, you're not allowed to display the first one. And, the CCP does things like that. The Chinese Communist Party also persecutes Falun Dafa, which we talked about quite a bit. Again, people who believe in the values of truthfulness, compassion, and tolerance, and the CCP uses them as living sources for organ transplants, also in the slave labor systems. Now, and again, others as well, including Tibetans, Mongolians, democracy activists, I mean, the list goes on. The bill also notes that students should be aware of aggression by such regimes against democratic nations and democracy, such as actions taken by the People's Republic of China to deter pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong and the increasingly aggressive pressure by the People's Republic of China toward Taiwan, a democratic friend of the United States. This is what it actually says, folks. Now, on that point, you might remember Hong Kong had an agreement with China. Hong Kong, being a former British colony, had the British legal system had a British system of democracy, again, republic type system. It had, again, a Western type system. Hong Kong was very much aligned with the West. When Britain handed over Hong Kong to the Chinese Communist Party as part of their whole agreement, pulling out of China, they were supposed to honor this agreement of one country, two systems. That was the name. One country, all part of China, but two systems. Mainland China, governed by the Chinese Communist Party. Hong Kong, governed by an independent democratic government that respects human rights and free speech and all the values of the West. The CCP just swept in there, said forget about this deal we made with the rest of the world, took over Hong Kong, destroyed their legal system, and turned Hong Kong into just another part of the Chinese Communist Party. And again, actually, as we speak, a lot of the Hong Kong democracy activists are standing on trial for that. The people who tried standing up against it are now facing prison, very long prison sentences. Now, the official statement from the House Committee on Education and the Workforce, who brought the bill to the House floor, they actually provided more context on what they view as the necessity of this bill. And their release on this goes deeper into some of the current day problems we face with communism. In particular, how the Chinese Communist Party has been infiltrating our education system. Things, for example, like the Confucius Institutes. And this is important because what our own government is raising right now is a really important point, is that our kids are being indoctrinated with communist ideology, whether we like it or not. Because the schools have brought in little red schools, they brought in, again, the Confucius Institutes, they've brought in teachers who sometimes teach them communist ideas, even if it's not officially instituted. The CCP has programs where they will actually pay American schools, and it's not just colleges, it actually goes all the way down to kindergarten. It's a K through college system they have bringing to the United States. They will pay schools for Chinese language programs and culture and history programs, but really it's CCP history and culture, meaning warped culture. And they'll try to indoctrinate American kids in American schools with the CCP's propaganda. This is already happening in America. Some countries have actually pushed back harder on this than we have. And Canada actually has done more to push out the CCP's education infiltration. But they're bringing up the point that right now kids are being indoctrinated by the CCP, and there needs to be a counter to that. They're bringing up that our kids are already seeing CCP propaganda, and we need to do something about it, at the very least, showing them the other side. Hopefully, I would say they also end up doing something like, for example, pushing out the Confucius Institutes and pushing out the Little Red schools and pushing out these other institutions in addition to all these other problems, because I think, frankly, it's fantastic if they teach kids about the dangers of communism and totalitarianism, but I think you also need to push the CCP out of our school system fully as well. Now, on this, folks, a lot of stuff is going on with this. Communism, has a pretty dark history, as you might suspect. Again, if you go by the Black Book of Communism, communism has killed around 100 million people. If you go by updated numbers, the number's closer to 150 million. And it's still counting because we don't even really know how many the Chinese Communist Party has killed, because it's still a black book, basically. Communism has a very dark history of political suppression, persecution, and violence that's been swept under the rug, it says here, by malign foreign actors infiltrating American education institutions. For example, the Chinese Communist Party, it says, is using Confucius classrooms, the K-12 equivalent of the CCP's Confucius Institutes on college campuses, to disseminate propaganda in American schools and cover up the atrocities of past communist regimes. It says over 500 K-12 schools across the United States have allowed the Chinese Communist Party to establish itself in their halls under the guise of Confucius classrooms, which is ridiculous, by the way, because the CCP demonized Confucius and basically, I won't even repeat what they said, but insulted Confucius. The CCP was anti-Confucius because he taught family values. But they note here that these institutions have been especially concentrated close to U.S. military bases. As one member of the CCP Politburo put it, Confucius Institutes are a part of China's foreign propaganda strategy. So why are we still allowing it, right? Now they note as well, support for communism should have no place in American schools. Unfortunately, troubling statistics show 28% of Gen Z hold a favorable opinion of the term communism compared to just 6 and 3% for boomers and the silent generation. And notice that 18% of Gen Z think communism is a fairer system than capitalism and deserves consideration in America. And it says 19% of Gen Z believe that dictatorship is the best political system compared to only 3% of the silent generation. Now look, those numbers are shocking, especially when you consider these younger generations are the future of our country. And if that's what they want, if that many believe that communism is a better idea, or they believe the country should have that, then those individuals who grow up one day, they're going to try to push it in the future. Now, personally, I think that educating kids about the dangers of communism would make a huge difference. I personally do not believe that kids would support communism if they really knew what it was. If they really knew the truth about it, if they really know what it has accomplished, which is the killing of upwards of 150 million people, I don't think they would support it. I think they only support it because they've been lied to and indoctrinated with propaganda, including from the CCP. And even from some of the crazy stuff they're teaching kids in the schools in general. Now, it's also important to note that this huge shift in views between generations may not be by accident. As they note, the Chinese Communist Party has in fact been infiltrating the American education system, and the views the CCP teaches are those of the communist regime. They want to demonize the American system, and they want to promote the CCP's system. They demonize America, they demonize American values, they demonize everything we stand for, and they try to promote again what they call the China model, saying that this is what works. That's what they tell our kids. Now look, it's something that really does oppose the founding values of the United States and everything we stand for. And I think this would raise the real question of why are we allowing it in our schools if that's the case. Now folks, in other news, Committee Chairwoman Virginia Fox said in a statement on this as well, that it's not a radical idea to say that American values should be taught in American schools. What a concept, right? But she said, but at a time when nearly a third of Gen Z are in favor of communism, it's clear. She says it's clear that we're falling short when it comes to educating young people about the history and dangers of that ideology. The crucial Communism Teaching Act, this one that just got passed by the House, is an important step in making sure that the future leaders of our great nation have the tools and knowledge to protect capitalism and freedom for the next generation. She said, I'm grateful to Congresswoman Salazar for lending her firsthand experiences and leadership to this vital effort. Now, I think this is an important point as well. The system of government that we have, and even the basic value of freedom, these can be lost in a single generation if future generations don't uphold it. And in addition to this, there are communist and socialist groups aggressively targeting our kids for these exact reasons. You know, House Speaker Mike Johnson, he raised this point as well. He said in a statement that communism has a long, dark history of political suppression, persecution, and violence. And he said that unfortunately the realities of communism are often overlooked or downplayed in our education system, allowing malign foreign actors to push their agendas and influence American institutions. He said as we face growing challenges from adversaries like the Chinese Communist Party, the crucial Communism Teaching Act takes a stand against this dangerous trend. And he said it is more important than ever that our students are taught the true dangers of communism and the importance of safeguarding our freedoms. He said, I appreciate Congresswoman Salazar for her leadership in ensuring that the future of our country's education system is rooted in the lessons of history and the preservation of our values. Now, folks, personally, I think, again, this would be great for our kids. I think the overwhelming majority this was passed by, including by both Republicans and Democrats. I think that suggests this could have a very strong chance of passing when it goes to the Senate, but we'll see. Now, look, in other news, folks, world economies appear to be reaching a brink. Many countries right now are facing serious economic problems. And it now appears there's not going to be an easy way out for many of them. A lot of them may not be able to avoid a pretty serious shakeup. Some of the focus right now is on France and a possible ripple effect that its economic problems could sweep through the entire European Union and probably other countries as well. Now, The Telegraph says this, It says, even for those well-versed in the Byzantine workings of the French Constitution, it's hard to know how the present impasse might pan out, but in financial markets, alarm bells are already ringing almost as loudly as they did at the height of the Eurozone debt crisis of 2009 to 2012. Now it notes, if a tiny little country such as Greece can threaten Europe's grand experiment in monetary union, as it did back then, think what a major economy such as France, one of the two cornerstones of Europe's wider economic and political union, might do. You know, it's Europe once again stands at the edge of the precipice, staring into the abyss below. It has been there so many times before, only to step away at the last minute, that one must suppose some way will again be found to muddle through. Yet at this point, things look pretty desperate. It says, the situation is similar in some respects to the threat of government shutdown that perennially affects Washington when congressional lawmakers refuse to raise the debt ceiling. In France, it says that basically with this, there's no way they can avoid it without a serious risk of outright default. Now, folks, with this as well in other countries, the move with this, they're facing a lot of other problems. Rampant welfare programs being implemented to support the policies of mass migration. If you have a collapse within some of the cornerstones of the European Union, think France, Germany, used to be the UK, the countries that pay the most into the European Union, you have a handful of countries that pay more, and you have a handful of countries, and most of them actually, that pay much less than they actually need. And so you have an imbalance within who pays into it and who takes out of it. If you take out the countries that pay into it and they collapse, that's going to affect the entire European Union. And because most of Europe has been bringing in mass migrants, and again, they have programs just like the US to support surrounding countries. If they send all those people back to Africa and the Middle East and everywhere else, you're going to watch a ripple effect, just like what's happening with America right now, throughout all these other regions as well. This is the makings of a regional economic crisis. Now, the Telegraph said this in an opinion. It says, it used to be that mass migration was unambiguously good for the economy, yet in Britain and other major European economies, the past 25 years have witnessed unprecedented levels of migration. And it says that in Singapore is one example where companies are forced to pay a premium for unskilled migrant labor. The principle is already well established. Now, notes also the same observation can be applied to welfare. And I mean, really, folks, this is what's happening, right? It says throughout much of Europe, that seems to be where we've ended up. Meaning, of course, the problems they're facing right now are rippling through the entire region. Now, we've seen other problems as well. There's the potential collapse of Germany and its potential effect of destabilizing the European Union. This could become a very serious problem if Germany, in addition to France, both collapse economically. And we also see concerns along these lines growing in Canada as well, with their own shake-up government, where notably Justin Trudeau might actually be forced to step down, and they might be forced to have a new election. Now, of course, look, when it comes to problems of economies, the problems we're seeing do have a solution. There is a way out, but it's not a solution that many of these countries seem willing to face just yet. To get out of debt, what do? If you want to get out of debt, you have to stop spending so much money. You need to start spending within your means, and you need to maybe spend a bit below it to start paying off your debt. That's how you get out of debt. You have to, live a bit more of a frugal life. Maybe not eat out every night. Maybe live a little less extravagantly, so you can have a bit of extra money to pay, not just pay the interest on debt, but pay off your debt. How do you do that? Well, you spend a lot less money. You need to get rid of a lot of the things that you've been putting your money in. You need to get rid of a lot of the luxuries you've been enjoying. You need to change the way you live in order to get out of debt. And for Europe, they're facing that reality just like we are in the United States. Now, Argentina, as I was mentioning, they have made the model for this. Javier Malay, the new president of Argentina, Trump has said that he's his favorite president, his favorite foreign leader. And they have shown a way out. It's not one of these countries are willing to face just yet, it seems, but to get out of debt, you need to start spending within your means, and you need to have an economic system that is self-sustaining. And for some of these countries, that likely means cutting some of their socialist policies, possibly reducing government spending. And look, Argentina, under President Javier Malay, they are quickly becoming a working example of how this can be done. The national poll said this. They said in just 1 year, President Javier Malay has transformed Argentina's economic landscape, slashing the national budget deficit to zero for the first time in 123 years. They say this is a historic milestone for his presidency, which began December 10th, 2023, about 1 year ago, right? Then Malay took over an economy crippled by rampant inflation, where supermarkets had to adjust prices daily. However, with his aggressive cutbacks to the size of the state, often symbolized by his wielding a chainsaw, which he's done on his campaign trail, Malay has steered the country back toward fiscal stability. He has actually got them to the point where they're no longer having a deficit. Now look, there are some mixed views on this. Some people argue against it. They say cutting government spending means people who used to depend on that, they lose what they had. It means that government workers who lost their jobs are now out of work and they're looking for new work. It means people who lived on government programs, and there's a lot of them, they may have to look for something else because they're no longer getting the money they used to get. Meaning, some of the people who used to depend on government money don't get it anymore. And the people who used to depend on government money, whether it's through social welfare programs or whether it's through just government jobs and bloat, they don't have anything. They've lost their means because they used to get government money, taxpayer money. Now, the other side of that argument is that it may have been an illusion in the first place. It's like a person living a luxurious life, but their luxuries are just from credit cards. Imagine a person who every time they need more money, they just buy a new credit card, right? Or go get a new credit card and they just max it out. You can only do that for so long before the whole thing comes crashing down on you. And to avoid that, the person needs to stop living on debt. They need to start living within their means and stop spending beyond what they have. The reality for a lot of these countries, whether it was Argentina, as it used to be, whether it's Europe, whether it's the United States or Canada, it means a lot of these countries have been living beyond their means. At least with government spending, they've been spending beyond their means, which is why we have such crazy debt. And it means, of course, that if you get out of it, you're going to have to live on lower standards during the interim of building a system that is economically sustainable. Naturally, there's going to be some pain involved. And again, Europe is now facing that reality. Now look, folks, meanwhile, Fortune had a piece recently that noted the extent to which the U.S. economy outweighs those of the rest of the world. And look, of course, it's Fortune. Their argument was that U.S. market dominance is a bad thing because we're the evil global capitalists, apparently. They argue that it has sparked debts in other countries. But the counter-argument is also that the United States trades at a loss with most countries. And regardless, it does highlight what where the U.S. economy stands. This is important, folks. Remember, as we speak, as part of Trump's plans to reel in spending, as part of Trump's plans to revive this country, he wants to stop sending our money all over the world. He wants to stop making it so that we trade at a $100 million or $100 billion deficit with Canada, $200 million deficit with Mexico, that we're not trading with China and basically subsidizing their shipments and everything else, that they're not undercutting us on the global economies, that Europe isn't putting 100% tariffs on our cars, these kinds of things. That they're not forbidding American products from even being sold in their markets. Trump is saying those days are coming to an end. And I don't think people realize fully what that actually means in practice. Let me show you this. Fortune says U.S. companies now account for 70% of the leading global stock index, up from 30% in the 1980s, while the U.S. economy's share of global GDP is just 27%. It notes indexes and weight stocks by price. Indexes that weigh stocks by price instead of market cap and adjust for the leading tech giants show the U.S. has outperformed the rest of the world by more than 4-1 since 2009. Now look, The piece raising some concerns with that as well, mainly with the growing credit bubble. It argues the global economy is about to face the bursting of the biggest credit bubble in human history, although the U.S. economy is faring significantly better than the rest of the world. Now, it notes as well, after massive stock gains in 2023 and this year, Wall Street expects the good times to keep rolling in 2025. It says Bank of America sees the S&P 500 reaching 6,666, a concerning number, by the way, by the end of next year. And CFRA sees it hitting 6,585, with both representing upside of about 8%. And its market guru Ed Yardeni has a target of 7,000 by then, indicating a 15% surge. Meaning the U.S. economy dominates most of the global market by a very large extent. We do not experience the results of that because we trade at a loss with most countries and we send money all around the world. Basically, we have so much money, we're like the global welfare state. We're the global sugar daddy, right? And many countries that have been living off that are now being told basically by Trump, time to go get a job, the money's coming to an end. Look, folks, also, with this, there's the incoming Trump effect and the possibility of U.S. sanctions on other countries, tariffs. Trump is using tariffs as one of his biggest international tools for foreign diplomacy and also for renegotiating international trade deals. He's saying, take our goods or we're going to put, equal tariffs on everything you're sending us. And a big, move right now to bring manufacturing back to the United States, to bring energy back to the United States, to stop importing that from everybody else and bring other industries back to the United States, making it so that we're not dependent on other countries for rare earth minerals or medical products or anything else, that we have what we need within our own borders and we stop, again, sending money all over the world. Now, on the overall issue of cutting costs, though, the United States is going to be looking into what it can cut in order to reel in government spending and to start chipping away at the national debt. And Trump has previewed what that could be, what it's going to look like. Now, I'll be going into this after we go back from a quick break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be back in less than 60 seconds.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. The United States is also going to be looking into what it can cut, and we have a lot to cut because we give money to a lot of people. And they're trying to reel in government spending and to start chipping away at our national debt. Now look, the upcoming Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, as they call it, with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, they're going to be one of the key parts of this effort. And President-elect Donald Trump, well, he gave some recent comments on how this investigation into what's going to be cut is going to look like. Watch this.
Through the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk has been working very hard with various people, including Vivek. We'll going to eliminate hundreds of billions of dollars of waste and fraud, and I can only tell you, I'll give you a little early report, they're finding things that you wouldn't even believe. So we're looking to save maybe $2 trillion, and it'll have no impact. Actually, it'll make life better, but it'll have no impact on people. It's not like we will never cut Social Security, things like that. It's just waste, fraud, and abuse.
Now look, we're not yet being given any specifics on where these cuts might be. So for now, it's Trump alleging that the cost they're looking to cut are not things that will affect the quality of life for the average Americans. They're saying basically we're spending money on a lot of things that have no impact, no benefit for the average American citizen. And they're saying these things can be cut and basically the average American won't even notice they're gone. Now, we have gotten a preview of this, I'd say. I'm sure some of you have been following the spending bill. They're trying to avoid a government shutdown. Let me explain briefly what's happening with that. Congress right now in the United States, they have not passed the official budget going into this entire year. And so every few months, they have to renegotiate a budget to avoid a shutdown. Basically what's happening with that, they keep delaying it, but by doing this, they've been able to negotiate new budgets every single time. And what happened this time was something very unique. They're negotiating the new budget. The bill, the proposal that came out was like this big. It's like 1,500 pages. And what happened was they were getting ready to pass it. Republicans and Democrats were on board with passing it. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, again the guys with the new Doge department, they then began writing publicly on X, or formerly known as Twitter, on what was actually included in the spending bill. And the American people learned suddenly what they're planning to spend our money on. They wanted to spend money on crazy stuff like, new bio research labs, and they wanted to give members of Congress raises, and they wanted to basically give themselves all these handouts, and they wanted to, stuff that has no interest for the American taxpayer. What happened then is that Trump came out publicly, said this is ridiculous, why are Republicans allowing this to pass? Cut out all the pork. It's ridiculous, you're doing this. You're putting this 1,500-page thing together, and most of the spending is stuff Americans should not be spending money on. They wanted to build like a football stadium, I think in like DC and stuff like that, right? It's things like that. They redid the budget, they brought back a new one. It went from like 1,500 pages down to like 50 pages. Now that bill also failed to pass. It was almost all the Democrats voted against it. A handful of Republicans joined them to vote against it. That one did not pass. And now they're trying to do a third review of it and third revision of it. And if they don't, the U.S. government will shut down. And keep in mind, a government shutdown doesn't mean the government just goes away. It means that they only fund crucial services. And the irony with that is that some folks on like the Trump team argued that that's kind of how it should work anyway, just crucial services. So we're on the brink of that right now. The downside of that is a lot of government employees will not get their income. They won't get paid. And it's right before Christmas. And that's not a very nice thing to do. But that's kind of where things are at right now. And folks, that said, hit the like button, leave a comment. Let's jump into some questions. And look, I'm curious what you all think of this. I'm kind of, again, reading the tea leaves, you might want to say. And I'm looking, I know in America right now, a lot of conservatives in particular are kind of celebrating that, hey, we're finally going to reel in our debt. We're finally going to stop sending money to everybody else in the world. There's two sides to that. The other side is that actually, because we've been doing this for so long, a lot of other countries are dependent on trading at a U.S. deficit. Canada's economy depends on the deficit we trade with them at. They depend on the fact that, again, they make like $100 billion a year through our deficit with them. Mexico depends on the trade deficit. And also, in addition to that, if we bring back American manufacturing, if we don't need to import energy from other countries, that's the bulk of Canada's exports. If we don't need to buy foreign cars, if we revive Detroit and the American automotive industry, that's like Mexico's surface level economy. If we cut off the drug trade, that's also big for them too, right? And so if America stops sending money all over the world, if we renegotiate our trade deals so that we actually don't lose out on almost all of them, if we force Europe to begin buying American goods because they actually deny us to sell a lot of our goods in Europe, this will have the effect of kind of crashing a lot of economies. And a lot of these countries are already on the brink, even with the fat there, even with the deficits there. a lot of these countries are already facing kind of like economic crash. And the question is, should we do it? Well, let me know your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what you think. I want to know what you all think about this. Should we do it? You know, Americans will make out fantastic. We'll do very well with this. A lot of other countries will not. Let me know what you think. I'm curious. Let's have a discussion. Let's see here. Judy Akeem, you're saying, will Trump put some Malay type thing off in the U.S.? I'd see how that would impact the rest of the world. Yeah, you're talking about, again, Javier Malay, the president of Argentina. So what Javier Malay has been doing to cut costs is, you might have seen some of the videos of this when Javier Malay was on the campaign trail. He had a board, a big whiteboard, and he had written, like on little pieces of paper, the names of different government agencies. And he's like, this department gone, this department gone, this department gone, and it doesn't come off. And he's like, even if they resist, and he takes it off and throws it. It was very entertaining. You know, the guy's good at showmanship like Trump is. But, you know, one thing the other side would bring up is, if you get rid of a government agency, that's jobs, that's livelihoods. When the government talks about how, you know, officials say, hey, we created 100,000 jobs, we created 200,000 jobs. Usually, if you look at the actual jobs they created, it's government jobs, right? They made a new government agency and hired 50,000 people or something. And in addition to that, a lot of times it's like jobs for illegal immigrants, right? Yeah, not the best jobs, but jobs, right? But hey, it still counts as a job. They are talking about doing that in the U.S. The incoming Department of Government Efficiency with Musk and Vivek, they are saying that they want to reduce the number of government agencies by like 2/3. And again, you know, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we do need to cut government spending, and that's the only way to do it. They want to get rid of some of the bloat within government agencies. You know, one thing people have talked about is the issue of what they call the administrative state, where in America you can create a government agency, the Department of, you know, whatever, right? Water management or something like that. You start off with a very small agency. A lot of times when they create an agency, it's very small, right? It has a very narrow focus. It doesn't do much. You know, they're focused on one or two issues. It's a very tiny office. And then the agency has pseudo autonomy to continue growing. And so what ends up happening with what they call the administrative state, and the Supreme Court has suggested they want to start reeling this in, at least the conservative-leaning ones do, they begin creating not legislation, but basically rules. And they can create rules for basically anything, not even limited to what they focus on. So you can have the Department of Energy creating rules that impact cars, which you think would be under the Department of Transportation, that affect land management because maybe they need land to build, you know, potentially solar farms or something like that. They begin getting involved in other areas, and so there begins to be a lot of overlap. They then create different rules, right, through the administrative state that do not go through the legislative process, meaning it bypasses Congress, it bypasses the normal system where laws are created. And these end up impacting the ability of people to do basically anything, right? They then begin growing and growing and growing, and the rules increase, and then the agency itself kind of takes on a life of its own. The problem is when you have more than like 400 agencies and they're all doing this, you then have not only an ever-expanding system, right? They're growing, they're creating jobs, right? They're creating more jobs, and they're also creating more rules. It then makes it very hard to move, and the amount of government spending just increases and increases and increases. Now, some people argue for that. Some people say it's a good thing. Some people say, hey, government job or not government job, it's a job. And you know, these are stable jobs. They get very high pensions. They tend to not really renegotiate that, so they get better pensions than most of the private industries. The problem with that, though, is that we're paying money for all of that, and we don't have enough money. We are spending significantly over our means. They are saying they want to cut this. Trump is saying he wants to get rid of the DOJ department is saying they want to get rid of most of these agencies, reduce them. Conservatives, I don't know so much Trump, but conservatives mostly have talked about getting rid of the administrative state, meaning the ability of agencies to just create rules like that. And they're also looking to get rid of a lot of foreign issues, right? Trade deals we have where we lose out, issues where countries won't take our goods, issues where we subsidize maybe international shipments like we do with China to an extent, and also make it so that hostile countries towards us, China and others like that, that again, they're held to account for what they're doing. And the reality is, this will cause a lot of people in America to initially lose their jobs. That will happen. And this will also cause a lot of people in other countries to probably lose a lot of money. Just being real, that will happen. And at a time when a lot of these countries are on the brink, you could watch economic collapse or massive economic problems in a lot of other countries. And the result of that is they're going to have to come to terms with it. And they will probably also have to adopt cost-cutting measures. They will also probably have to stop spending beyond their means. Remember, a lot of European countries, even within the European Union, do not contribute to the European Union. They take more than they give, even within the EU, let alone within their trade deals and relations with the U.S. And so the impact on some countries is going to be very, very harsh. Even just with deportations, a lot of countries in Latin America, especially in Central America, are saying that if Trump deports all these people, there's nothing in these countries for them, and it's going to collapse some of these countries potentially. Or at the very least, they're going to have hundreds of thousands or millions of people who are homeless, or who knows what they'll do. And so this is the looming reality that we are coming closer and closer to. And I would say also one of the reasons why many people who are part of those systems and who benefit from those systems probably hate Trump so much, right? This is kind of what I'm looking at. The other argument is that, well, maybe it's necessary. Maybe we've been living in an illusion this whole time, and it's time we break that illusion and reconstitute things in a way that are actually self-sustaining, because the reality is, as good as things are, it's an illusion. It's fake. It's artificially propped up. And it's artificially propped up in a way that it's not sustainable. We cannot continue functioning like this. And you can already look at the debt bubbles and the problems countries are facing even without the Trump effect coming in, and recognize that it is not sustainable. We cannot go on like this. And that's where the world is at right now. It's on this precipice. California gal, you're saying living within one's means nationally will be a big shakeup at first, but in the long run, things will be better overall. I can say personally, this is how I see it as well. Personally, my own personal views, I think it's going to be very difficult at first. I think there's going to need to be a very strong system in place to steer the ship, because we're going to be nearing some very rocky waters soon, right? There's going to need to be a very strong government reaction, probably in most countries, maybe even martial law, to subdue some of the backlash they're going to be facing as they near these massive problems. You are probably going to watch in most of Europe, they're going to have to get rid of their welfare states. A lot of countries in Europe are going to have to get rid of their welfare states. And the reality a lot of those countries face is that, the unfortunate reality is, a lot of the welfare state, the bulk of it is the migrants and so on. They might have to look at deporting many of them. They might have to even just cut off the money to many of the people, even if they are citizens who live off the welfare state. They might not be able to support it anymore. Even in addition to that, they might have to rethink their economies. They might have to rethink how much money government employees make. They might have to, ironically, change it so that, again, they have to spend less money at the government level, and they might have to look at programs to revive their own domestic industries. Now, if you were to ask me, this is the way I see things. I see the initial shakeup. I kind of see that coming very soon, frankly. I think life is going to be, I personally will say life is going to be very hard for about a year. This is what I'm anticipating. I'm anticipating life to be very hard for about a year for most countries. In the United States, let's be realistic with ourselves, right? We're probably going to see martial law. We will probably see very large presences of maybe military troops on the streets. We're going to see house raids, again, of illegal immigrants because they're saying they want to use the military to deport people. We're going to probably see riots. We're probably going to see a lot of maybe violence and people reacting to this. We're probably going to watch some pretty difficult times. We're also going to be watching the international backlash. We're going to be watching the adversaries of the United States capitalize on this, making noise about it. We're going to be watching a lot of the big corporate media propagandizing all of this. And so every single time, they're probably not going to be focusing on when they raid the Tren de Aragua, apartment building and all these gang members have all these guns and whatever else there. They're going to be focusing on, the kid crying as his dad gets deported. That's where all the news cameras are going to be. And so they're going to be propagandizing this all over the place. You're going to watch this. And this is going to create a global propaganda effect. You're also going to be watching the economic crumbling, especially as we begin renegotiating trade deals. I don't know if they're going to do this initially or what. Even with the damage right now to the Chinese economy, with the real estate markets and manufacturing, they're losing both of those, and that's about 2/3 of their economy. And in addition to that, the credit bubble, which is going to impact the other 1/3 of their economy, they're going under. The CCP is on the brink of collapse right now. Russia relies on Chinese money. They're on the brink of collapse right now, economic collapse. Trump is going to probably try to renegotiate things with Russia, a peace deal. That's going to have the economic problems with Russia are going to sweep also through Europe. And in addition to this too, you're going to be watching the mass deportations heading to Mexico and India and 190 something countries. And these countries are going to get a mass influx of the people who are coming here. Those countries are going to be facing real economic problems if they try to help these people, if they try to give them welfare or whatever else, but they probably won't. And so the world is about to be destabilized. Realistically, the world is about to be, the world as we know it is about to be destabilized. And I would assume that to deal with the destabilization, many countries are probably going to have very strong law enforcement or martial law. And this is purely me assessing the situation and trying to look ahead of the cause and effect of the current plans. And then you're going to be watching Americans learning about all the stuff we've been spending money on. We're going to be having the veil pulled back probably on some of the corruption issues. We're going to be watching if Trump actually does what he says and they want to declassify things like the JFK assassination, and they want to release the Epstein files, and they want to release a lot of things that have not been shown to the public. They're saying they want to do that. Americans simultaneously are going to be seeing a lot of things we were not allowed to see before. And that could have an impact too on, well, I don't think it'll impact the stability of the country because Americans will be perceiving this as justice, but this will have a big impact as well because it has the potential to expose a lot of potential corruption. And I don't know if people are fully prepared for a lot of this. Me just trying to assess all these moving parts and the things all these moving parts will affect. That's kind of how my mind works, right? I don't know if people are prepared for what's coming. Just being honest. It's going to be, I don't think people realize it probably will be kind of rough, right? It really will. But it will be a temporary rough stage in terms of what I see. Because the purpose is not to actually cause harm. The purpose is to get rid of all the problems get rid of a lot of the fundamental rot within the system, and from there repair it, and to try to repair it maybe as it even happens. We'll see if this all happens all at once or if it happens in stages, but this is what they're saying they're going to do. This is the actual policies and the actual statements of what they say they want to do. And this will all have an impact. This will all have ripple effects. Marco Conte, you're saying from Brazil, here we have MEC, the Education Culture Ministry, that manage all schools, no exceptions. They don't let no child be dedicated for homeschooling. And you're saying we are already dominated for culture warfare. I'm aware in a lot of countries it's like that. I've heard that in Germany as well, you don't really have a choice to homeschool your kids. In a lot of countries, education is the job of the government. The parent doesn't have a lot of say in it. Even in America, there are different states with different standards on that. I have some good old hotel coffee today. Now, even in America, it's state by state. Some states have much harsher rules on homeschooling. I'll give you an example. In New York, even the private schools are managed under the Department of Education. So even the private schools are looped in with the public school system. And so there really aren't purely private schools in New York. That was a recent law they passed just a few years back. Maybe it was a while ago. My sense of time is terrible. It might have been like 5 or 6 years ago. In New Jersey, right, if you go from New York to New Jersey, with and remember in New York that also applies to homeschools. You have to show your curriculum, you have to get it approved. It's a bit of a hassle. If you go to New Jersey, there are almost no laws regulating homeschool. Homeschool is a very open system. The parents have way more say in terms of what their kid is being taught. There are some standards for tests when the kid goes to, get their GED or whatever, but there really are not a lot of laws regulating. There's some, but there's not a lot regulating it. And so state by state, it's a huge difference. But I know in Brazil, again, even parts of Europe, it's very much like that, where everything, the entire education system and everything the kids are taught in schools, it's managed purely by the government, and the parents have very little say in it. For a lot of countries, it is the case. Gina Mikulik, you're saying, that Gen Z stat on communism is terrifying. It is. Here's a reminder of that Gen Z stat. I'll read it to you. This is from the House of Representatives report. It says, 28% of Gen Z hold a favorable opinion of the term communism, compared to just 6 and 3% for boomers and the silent generation. 18% of Gen Z thinks communism is a fairer system than capitalism and deserves consideration in America, and 19% of Gen Z believe that dictatorship is the best political system, compared to only 3% of the silent generation. I find that terrifying. I find that terrifying in terms of what that means when these kids grow up. Because some kids, some grown-ups, let's say, some adults, they may hate communism, but they kind of like some socialism, right? I think millennials, you'll find that there are some favorable views of like socialist type policies, but very strong dislike of communism. They're kind of the same thing, which I think most people don't realize. Socialism is just the political form of communism. That's all it is. But communism is like the belief, or like the ideology. It's like the religion. Communism is like the religion. Socialism is like the political system that religion takes when you put it into power. That's how you can kind of understand it. But for them to say outright that they actually support communism, that's shocking. That's really shocking. And I would partly blame that on social media and maybe the algorithms. And I think maybe there should be an investigation to whether some of these social media algorithms have been feeding that to kids. Maybe TikTok and the CCP behind TikTok had something to do with that. I find that really concerning. Ashley from California, You're saying Gen Z thinks communism means utopia, where you don't struggle and everything is provided to you by Big Daddy government. It's like school is just big infomercial for communism. Yeah. Well, even some of the proposals in schools is to make the schools function like mini communes, like mini communist communes. When they talk about like comprehensive education systems, or they call it community schooling, some of the proposals in California and so on, they want to make it so the schools are basically like college campuses. And so the school has restaurants, the school has businesses, the school has your medical services, like an on-site hospital. The school has everything the kid needs. And the school basically provides, a system of care for the normal, whatever it is, 7 to 3 p.m. schedule kids normally have, and then going from 3 p.m. to like 6 p.m. or 9 p.m. with additional like daycare programs, meaning basically, you get to see your kid, you take them and you put them to bed, and they would eat all 3 meals at school. They'll have breakfast there, they'll have lunch there, they'll have dinner there, and they'll basically just be in the handling of a government education system, and you barely see them. Now, if that sounds shocking to you, that's what communism proposed. That is, in fact, what the communist original system wanted to have. In fact, a lot of the early communes tried that. If you go to like the kibbutz systems in Israel, they used to practice. Some of them still do, but they used to practice that. And what they found was that maybe the first generation of communists wanted it. The second generation tended to not, because people love their kids, and you don't necessarily want your kid to be taken away from you. Most people still enjoy spending time with their kids, and they don't want their kids to be basically raised by the government, and the only role you have is providing a place for them to go home and sleep at night. Again, the phrase they use for that proposal, they call it community schooling. They're actually proposing that in the U.S. And part of the model for that is like the university system, right? Universities have that. They have the cafeteria and the restaurants and the businesses and the medical facilities, and Planned Parenthood is there, and the trans facilities are there, and all the activist groups are there, and the kids go there and they eat there and they live there and they sleep there and everything else, right? They want to take that model and basically replicate it for all grades. The only difference being you maybe wouldn't sleep there. And there are some people also saying the entire government should function like the university system, where you can think of the university campus as being like a model for what they call the 15-minute city, right? You don't need cars. Everything is walkable. Your work or your class, right? Instead of going to your classroom, you go to your workplace. It's all on campus. You live on campus. You work on campus. You eat on campus. All of your services are on campus. You never need to leave the campus. You never need to leave the 15-minute city. It's the same idea, basically. And the other idea they have is public-private partnership. Because remember, if you make it government-run rather than privately run, right, whether it's an NGO or a collaboration of businesses, and you're living in like the Walmart housing structure, I'm not throwing Walmart under the bus. I'm just throwing out a random corporation. You live at like X corporation's housing structure. You go to Y corporation's business. You go to Z corporation's medical facilities. It's all controlled by different corporate structures. The idea they had was that you have this system where the corporations are advised by NGOs and nonprofit groups. They get government money. They're propped up like that. The problem is none of these organizations, the NGOs, the nonprofits, the activist groups, the businesses, none of them have to enforce the Constitution. And the schools, the universities already kind of have been a model of this. The universities can create rules on what defines sexual harassment that are different from the actual laws of the state. and you can get kicked out if you don't follow the rules. They can create rules on speech, on your freedom of speech and public expression, whether you can go have a religious display on a college campus without getting kicked out. You know, they'll have your designated free speech zone. A lot of schools have this. There's the free speech zone, and free speech is only allowed at the free speech zone. If you do it elsewhere, they kick you out. If you allow these things to be created and they're managed through non-government entities, whether it's corporations or NGOs or nonprofits, whatever else, they don't have to enforce the actual Bill of Rights or the standards that our country is built on because they're private, right? They're private enterprises. And to an extent, you've already seen this happen with social media and censorship and everything else we've witnessed, where people said, well, these companies can decide what you can or can't say, and because they're private companies and they're not held by the First Amendment. That is part of what that proposal entails, right? So when people talk 15-minute city, when they talk about basically making public-private partnerships for what they call community schooling, this is what they're talking about. They're talking about creating a system where the NGOs and the big businesses basically begin to function like governments. And they can have a governing role, right, which is also the proposal. They call it like shared global governance or, I mix up these terms. There's so many terms they have for it. Shared government or what do they call it? Kind of like public-private partnership type things. They want to bring that in to these systems. Now that being said, a lot of that is off the table. You have not heard these organizations talk about this like they used to, but there are some states trying to do it. There are still groups trying to accomplish it, and that is part of what they want to achieve, unfortunately, right? Not everybody, but there are some groups that want to achieve that. Folks, all right, that said, I guess we're getting a bit late today. Thank you so much for being here. Real quick, folks, I had a special feature published on the Chinese Communist Party and how the Chinese Communist Party right now is trying to export its human rights abuses to the United States. I have a video exposing the CCP's leaked communications on this, the leaked plans on it, exactly what they're planning to do. This is no joke. This is a very serious issue. I hope everybody can watch this special feature. I think this is extremely important for people to be aware of right now because we expose what the CCP is doing, the communications they had on doing it, how they are going to accomplish it if they can, and what can be done to stop it. This is, again, something we found out the CCP has begun going back a couple years. In 2022, orders from Xi Jinping, the head of the CCP himself, we got whistleblowers revealing it. This is an extremely important special feature. I hope you can watch it, and I hope you can share it. I will show you a trailer before we go, but folks, that said, thank you so much for being here. That said, as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you. Leaked communications within China have revealed plans at the highest levels of the Chinese Communist Party to export its human rights abuses outside the country. And this involves a whole-of-government strategy running from within the CCP, which in turn uses its networks of influence in the United States to carry out these operations.
You get influential people in another country, in your target area, to do what you want and to create these narratives that suit the Chinese communists.
If you can persuade the media persuades the public drives the political action.
This is a blueprint. This is a blueprint for how the CCP can weaponize our media, our government, our legal system to go after any company or any group they want to.
It's really gone global, political warfare has, in a way that, quite frankly, we've never seen.